I see my world shaken. My floor, my bed, my table, my house, my pen stumbling across the saggy span of my page. The stanza splinter from the kicks of a demon, awake after a sleep of millions of years. I see my squares mangled from the litter of a wheezing earth. I see top of our towers crumble and topple onto the dried up river beds. I see rickety bridges shudder, waters undulating in the turquoise lakes on the lofty Himalayan heights, a bowl of milk held in the hands of a fearful grandma. I see daggers of snow crashing onto the mule paths, the salt roots threading to the rocky terrains clogged, the sheets of snow stained from mammoth avalanches, pinnacles of snow thrust from earth's hot tumble and disappear in a fraction of a second in God's colossal mouth. I see domes of our stupas crack, five-colored flags fluttering before Buddha's own eyes bend and break, oil lamps lit by Yeti's hollowed skull dim out in the sunken canyons of monks' wailing eyes. I see famished angels coming out of snow-clad sanctuaries like the saffron flames fleeing their kingdoms in exile. I see them come out and lean against the mossy fences on the threshold of great canyons to ponder over the loss of lives, uttering prayers as earth cracks open and engulfs their settlements in front of their own bemused eyes. I see shrines of our deities shake, the Lord's own body cracked in two lifeless boulders. His mace, his scepter, his lotus, his conch shell, his brass bowls of nectar, his splintered quiver full of blunt arrows. I see my world shaken. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here to be part of this International Literature Festival of Kerala. As you know, this panel is about South Asia and poets from Nepal and other parts of the South Asian world. Unfortunately, the Pakistani guy didn't get the visa. And so we are the only two from Nepal in a way. So this will be a celebration of the Himalayas and the Nepal, the mountains, the highest mountains in the world. Coming from the top of the world to the backwaters of Kerala is an amazing experience. We were freezing under -5 in Kathmandu, and when we took the flight, and all of a sudden we had to shed all of our clothes. And especially going to the shrine of Shiva here, they made me take my shirt off, so which was even better. So it was so hot. You know, everything in the Himalayas is sacred, is very, very solemn. We have Everest is not a Nepali name. The Nepali name of Everest is Sagarmatha, meaning forehead of the sky. Everest is the name of this British guy who in the colonial times tried to prove if Everest is the highest mountain in the world. So nobody knows the Nepali name, everybody knows Everest. And this British guy who was working as a regent then. A Tibetan name for Everest is Chomolungma, meaning mother of the winds of the world, which again is very poetic, as opposed to this British guy's name. You know, British come and go and they change everything, and we are left with this burden of the British Empire. First poem I want to read is about the mountains. I trek every year. I go to the mountains, and we don't have roads up in the mountains. You have these, mules who carry the load up into the Himalayas. So my first poem that I want to read is called Mules. It's about the human mules who carry the load, the Sherpas, as well as the animals who carry the stuff up into the Himalayas. So, the mules. On the great Tibetan salt route, they meet me again, old forsaken friends. On their faces, fatigue of a drunken sleep, their lives worn out, their legs twisted, shaking from carrying lustrous ponds of bleeding ascents. Age-long bells clinging to them like festering wounds, beating notes of a slavery that modernism brings, cartoons of iceberg, mineral water bottles, solar heaters, Chinese tiles, tin cans, carom boards, sacks of rice, and iodized salt from the plains of Nepal Tarai. Butterflies of the terrace fields know their names, singing brooks, tempests of their breathless climbs. Traffic alert and time tested, they climb, carrying dreams of posh peacocks, pamphlets of a secret religious war, filth of an ecologist-style seaman, entire kitchen for a cocktail party at the base camp, defunct development agendas of guilty donors, the West's weird visions lusting for an instant purge. Stone steps of the mountains embossed on their drugged brains like lines of aborted love, scratched on the historic rocks of the water spouts. Starry skies of the dozing valleys know the ache of their secret sweat. Sunny days along the crystal rivers taste of their bleeding eyes. And the greatest fiction of their lives lost like real mules, clattering their hooves on the flagstones, encircling the cruel grandeur of bloodthirsty mule paths around the glaciers of Annapurnas. Thank you. So Annapurna again is not an English name, it's a Nepali name for the mountain region. Annapurna literally means the goddess who fills your house with food. So Anna is food and Purna is the one who fills. So it's Lord Shiva's wife. The glaciers, they melt and they cultivate the entire landscape. And that's how you get your food. And so even, it's very sacred, everything, including even the mountains, even, the landscape is considered sacred in a way. Also, I was in Italy. They took me around and showed me the Alps. And they said, what do you think of it? I said, well, it's a nice garden, compared to the Himalayas, because the Himalayas is so wild and so very intense. You can fall off the cliff. People who live there don't like it, actually. Most of the people want to come to Kathmandu and live there because mountains, it's only for the Westerners and tourists who go up in the Himalayas and find this great thing. But the beauty of mountains in Nepal is that there's a lot of romance. It's not just the mountains, it's the people there, the monasteries, the folklore, the legends, the imagination of people. We have Tulsi Divas, who's one of the folklorists, and he'll be talking about the folklore of Nepal. And so this is the great beauty of going to the Himalayan mountains, and not just to the Western world where there's nothing but just the mountains. So this poem I want to read is a love poem. And as you know, Sanskrit masters have this rasa theory. So this poem has love as a predominant emotion, as ras. A poem is called River. And it's more interesting, it's not about my wife, it's about someone else's wife. So you would find it different. River. Between your marble shoulders and my hairy chest, the river roaring, tears, tears, tears. Between your mellowing mouth and my center tongue, a night of flames and flesh, flesh, flesh. Between your hefty thighs and my throbbing hands, clouds drunk from the forest of rhododendrons, rhododendrons. Between your almond eyes and my warm mouth, rain dropping like pearls on the plump leaves of the jungle, jungle, jungle. Between your shimmering skin and my dark hair, grass greener than the greenest parakeet, growing yellowish from incessant rain, rain, rain. Between your nights by the impotent pillow of your husband and my crazed headpiece, a poem of spring that shall fill my deep wounds, sprouting flowers, flowers, flowers. Between your tulips and my fragrant pen, a brain fever bird's crazed cry, mad, mad, mad. Between yours, between the sparkle of your teeth and my sleep, a rain coming like a roar of a starving stream in the starless summer gloom of the night, night. Between your melon breasts, between your melon breasts and thrust of my soft lips, the rage of the river battering its head against the magic mountains, mountains. Between your decisions and my flickering lamps, the river mad, you poet, you bastard, go away. Thank you. I would like to read a Nepali version of this poem so you get a feel of Nepali language and discuss more about Nepali literature subsequently, and also probably read a couple of poems in Nepali and English translation. A poem is called, this same poem, River, in Nepali now. Khola. तिम्रो संगमरमरी कान्द मेरा चौडा छातीको बीचमा गर्जिरहेछ एउटा खोला आँसु 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 तिम्रो गुलियो मुख र मेरो सुगन्ध जिब्रोको बीचमा एउटा रात फलिङ्गाहरूको टल्काइरहेको त्यो न्यानो नरम त्वचा 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 तिम्रो मासल जिउ र मेरा कामिरहेको हातहरूको बीचमा छन् बादल मातिएका लाली गुराँसे वनको सुगन्धले 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 तिम्रो बदामी आँखा र मेरो तातो मुखको बीचमा खसेका छन् पानीका थोपा मोती झैं जंगलका बाक्ला हरिया पातहरूमाथि तिम्रो चम्किरहेको सेतो छाला र मेरो कालो कपालको बीचमा सुगाभन्दा हरिया पातहरू पहलिएका छन् अनवरत वर्षाले वर्षाले तिम्रो जडिया लोग्नीको नपुंसक सिरानी र सँगै बिताइएका तिम्रा रातहरू मेरा बहुलाइएको टाउको बीचमा उम्रिरहेछ एउटा सानो कविता बसन्तको बसन्तको जसले मेरो गहिरो घाउहरू भर्नेछ र उमार्नेछ फूलहरू 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 तिम्रा नीला पारिजात फूलका आँखा र मेरा कामिरहेको हातहरूको बीचमा एकलिएको एउटा बन्चरोको एकल चितकार पागल 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 तिम्रो मोती जस्तै सेतो दाँत र मेरा निन्द्राको बीचमा दौड्दै आइरहँदैछ बर्खे पानी कुनै भोको नदीको रोदन झैं ताराई तारा नभएको बिरानो आकाश र ग्रीष्म रातको उराट लाग्दो अन्ध्यारोमा तिम्रा ठुला छातीहरू र मेरा नरम तिखराको बीचमा क्रुद्ध खोलाको आक्रोश ठोकिरहेछ आफ्नो टाउको जादु जस्ता पहाडहरूमा तिम्रा निर्णयहरू र मेरा निमन लागेको टुकी बीचमा बोला खोला बहलाइएको त कवि त मूर्ख नपुंसक जा गई हाल निस्की हाल. Thank you. Also, as I was mentioning, there is this word Devatatma in Sanskrit. Sagarmatha is a Nepali name, but then there is this Sanskrit word Devatatma, which means place where soul of the god lives. So when you go up in the mountains, you have this kind of feeling of touching the soul of the god, a kind of divine existence. So I was up in the mountains, and I met this German lady, and she was going up in the mountains, up ahead before me, even though she was older than me. So I was a little upset, and I asked her, "What do you do for a living?" And she said, "I'm from Germany, and what do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm a poet." Oh, she said, "You got to go on top of this mountain." And it was getting dark. And I said, "Well, I know this area. You don't have to tell me." She said, "Nine." She was a very strong German kind of mother. And she took me all the way to this strange mountain in the middle of the night. And I was like shocked. I went there was nothing. There was this small shack. And this guy, a drunken kind of guy, lodge owner, was making tea and coffee and a local wine. So we sat there, and she wanted to go back to the village. And I said, "What's going on? Why do you want to leave me alone here?" And this guy had a huge dog, a Tibetan Mastiff. And I'm afraid of dogs. So I was thinking that this guy is that this dog is going to eat me up, at night. So I couldn't go out. I said, please tie the dog. Can you please tie the dog? But he couldn't, she couldn't, she said, sir, don't worry. He will do nothing to you. He's okay. But he was a huge dog. And I repeatedly asked him to please tie the dog. And he said, sir, don't worry. Because he's afraid of the tiger who comes at night. I said, what? A tiger comes? I'm afraid of the dog. And there's a tiger at night? So I was like all night long in my room and never went out. And then in the morning when I woke up, I went out and I saw all around me these glaciers. And then I knew why he brought me there and why she brought me there. And I could feel the intensity of Devatatma, the soul of God there. So this poem called, and I saw the lodge, the name of the lodge was Little Paradise Lodge. So this poem called Little Paradise Lodge that I wrote in that small village. Little Paradise Lodge. My pen frozen against the daggers of Annapurnas. On a blank, shapeless plank, chopped from a sandalwood tree trunk and used as a table, I place my elbows and hold my face in my hands. Blinding snows of the Annapurna ridge, hugely shining in the eye of my mind, I sit in the spacious courtyard of your paradise lodge, deciphering shrill notes of birds in the massy trees. One bird initiates a lilting note like our meeting, while others let loose a racket of breath vessels ending with question tags. Can I stay longer? At least one more day in your little paradise lodge. Two birds playing in the crimson cherry tree stir a chord that seems like opening up of the blossoms of our bodies. Would you take me away and marry me? But what about this electric whistle? This cicada's constant chirr, chirr, chirr. The struggle of our breathless bodies against the dark suit of the night. The pigeons strutting freely in your courtyard, cool like exhausted porters, climbing the mule paths in the singing gorges. Their guttural quent quent qua, quent quent qua, quent quent qua. They seem to be using a human language, a kind of hushed speech robbers might use. Love, in the courtyard of your little paradise lodge, I see silence turning flowers into daggers. A herd of cows shuffles past me in a joyous mood, festive like young girls going to a hillside fair, saying, don't you go away, brother. Don't you go away. We would be back until dusk with presents. A cuckoo passes overhead, insisting ka, ka, ka. Please do not leave me alone. I'm utterly alone, stuck on the last mountain of the world. And beyond me, just one more mountain where they say a deity lives guarding a tiny turquoise lake. And thereafter, nothing but a realm of melting snows where souls of the gods live. Thank you. I wanted to switch gears here and talk a little bit about Nepali poetry and discuss, Nepali poetry. I want to talk especially about this poet called Gopal Prasad Rimal, who was a very, very important poet. And he, in those days of Rana regime, when there was this despotic kings and Ranas who were ruling, he's the first poet who initiated the idea of revolution and idea of prose poetry. And he will gather his people in the temple, the shrines, and raise voice against the autocratic Rana rulers. But then they found him. They found that they are doing this, and they kind of imprisoned him. And but he was like up in the air, holding his knife and saying, "I will finish them off." And people thought he's crazy, and they sent him to Ranchi in India, and where the doctors took a rib out of his back, thinking that he will focus on the pain and not on poetry and not on revolution. And in the end, he died limping in the streets of Kathmandu. He's the father figure in the Nepali literature, and he's very instrumental. And most of the modern poets, younger poets, are under his influence. So I want to read. I wrote a poem about him, and I think I'll ask here Srijana to read a poem of him in Nepali. But I'll read a poem that I wrote on him, and it's called Gopal Prasad Rimal, and that will be my tribute to him, and talks a little bit about his, uh, his contribution to Nepali literature and how he brought the idea of a revolution in Nepal, and how, but even after the revolution, when Democrats came to power, they ignored him to death. You know, politics is always crazy. And he was so disgruntled, and he held his knife out in the street saying, I'll finish them all. You know, it's like a kind of very tragic figure of a poet. But he is very, very much regarded, a lot of big influence on younger poets now. So poem Gopal Prasad Rimal. A poet pulls a fresh sun out from the dark, festering uterus of oligarchy. I salute you, poet. I salute. I salute your motion of smashing brass bells of orthodoxy on the threshold of history, of ushering forth a dawn of democracy. I salute you, poet. I salute your disillusionment with the wolves of change and sham suitors of revolution who wrenched a rib out from your shattered body to keep your eyes off the storms of change and make you romp like a buffoon with the harlots of anarchy in the conspiring castles of filth. I salute you, your disenchantment with the stammering fathers of the nation who left you crippled and go alone to go mad in the blind streets of the termite-eaten capital of fiery dragon. I salute you, poet. I salute your madness. I salute your total rejection of a pose of hypocrisy, your morbid visits to the temple of Mahakal to utter a prayer, to light a pagoda of poems, your fierce display of kukri knife, wanting to bring another revolution, your desire to donate semen for healthy wombs. I salute your rise from the debris of history to tell us a day comes but once in an age. So, thank you. So I would like to read a translation of this poet, but I would like Srijana to come and read one poem in Nepali about this poet, so you get a feel of what this poet sounded like.
Namaste and good evening, everyone. The title of this poem is तिमीको। यहाँ हामीलाई आफ्नो अशक्यता नै प्रिय छ, त्यसलाई छोप्ने अहङ्कार नै प्रिय छ, त्यो उदाङ्ग पार्न खोज्ने तिमीको। यहाँ हामीलाई यो अलमल नै प्रिय छ, यो धर्मर नै प्रिय छ, तर हामी त्यसोलाई त्यसो भन्न चाहदैनौँ, त्यो भन्ने तिमीको। यहाँ श्रृङ्खला ल्याउन खोज्ने तिमीको। हामीलाई हाम्रो हार नै प्रिय छ, दुर्गति नै प्रिय छ, यो पसारो नै प्रिय छ, उदाङ्ग उठाउन खोज्ने तिमीको। हामीलाई हाम्रो सुधार चाहिएको छैन, क्रान्ति चाहिएको छैन, उधारो गुण र क्रान्तिको भ्रान्ति कसैले केही बेरका लागि दिए हुन्थ्यो भन्ने हाम्रो जपना छ। त्यसो नगर, आफै योग्य बन भन्ने तिमीको। आफ्नो अशक्यता, आफ्नो आलस्य, आफ्नो घिनसिन पोख्ने हामीलाई एउटा पात्र चाहिएको छ। हामी हाम्रो हितैषीलाई मारेर भए पनि हामी उसले भन्या जस्ता होइनौँ भनेर आफ्नो वीरता साबित गर्न चाहन्छौँ, त्यो नगर भन्ने तिमीको। Thank you.
This was the poet who kind of introduced revolution in Nepal, and then he's a big modernist influence. He wrote plays. He was very much inspired by Ibsen, and so Nepali poetry, the basic shape is more of a protest, because there were 30-year-old despotic rule in Nepal, and the poets were more up against these rulers and trying to bring justice. And then when the revolution came, Nepal has undergone dramatic change in the past few decades. There were Maoist revolution, then there were removal of monarchy. So this poet is in a way very central, and politics is very much crucial in Nepali poetry. So I will read the translation that I made of this poem that she's just read. I kind of change it a little bit, a song of slaves. This could be, who are you? But I kind of added a kind of thing. Our ponds of inertia are dear to us. Our pride in preserving these ponds is dear to us. Who are you to tarnish glorious pinpoints of our pride? In here, we love the clouds of our confusion. In here, our indecision is dear to us. I might put it otherwise. Who are you to rank our ranges? In here, we wear faces of our final loss. You haven't won. Winner is someone else. Who are you to question the windmills of our defeat? We love the dank sloth of our decadent streets. We love the clubs of injustice hammering sparks of humiliation out on our heads. We love sweet sleep of our destiny's dragon. Who are you to besmirch our eyes with waking's tempestuous sweep? We don't love apples of your grand dreams. The towers of your change are undear to us. Oh, if we could only steal the moons of someone's faith. Don't do this. Be self-reliant. Who are you to shake the balance of our dusty dreams? All we need is a hero to smoothen the crevices of our drudgery. All we need is a character to scatter sparks of our defeat, assassinating our savior, saying, we aren't what he tried to make of us. We might chance to prove our worth. But who are you to say, do not do this, do not do this? Thank you. I will read one more poem about, as there was a revolution in Nepal in 1990s, and there's this poem I wrote about a lot of women were raped and people were imprisoned. And these people now, all these people who are struggling now are in power, are unfortunately as corrupt as the rulers were. But this poem I wrote was, it's called Lakshmi Lekali. It's one of the women who was raped, during those days by police. So they took her in and they made her drink urine, and they kind of, it was big news in 1990s. The rulers were really very atrocious, and it's a kind of prophetic thing. So this poem called Lakshmi Lekali, about this woman who was raped. Lakshmi Lekali, sister of our butchered dreams. Lakshmi Lekali, the foolish cops who conspired to dictate awe of your slogans and plotted to smash the heightened pagodas of your integrity, knew very little about the consequences of raping the urge of an flame. Lakshmi Lekali, the fragrance of your simmering shies tickles the battered flowers drying in the books of my anguish. Lakshmi Lekali, the urine that they forced you to drink has erupted ulcers of rage on my quaking shoulders. Lakshmi Lekali, the raped daughter of our hungry hearts. Lakshmi Lekali, forgive me, my verbal revenge isn't enough to remove leeches of insult clung to your breasts. Lakshmi Lekali, forgive me, the rods of despotic boorishness they thrust into your private parts have caused a crack in my skull. Lakshmi Lekali, I roam victorious in the charred fields of the city, seething from the scourge of your curses. Lakshmi Lekali, yours are the waves of milk. Lakshmi Lekali, even earth shook droplets of terror to see the forced nightmare of this monstrous orgasm. Doom is the world, doom of someone who, having raped a complete little supernova, waits for some infested gorilla for its least lethal aftermath. You, Lakshmi Lekali, my victorious muse, my Lakshmi Lekali, your shrieks made the shimmering fishtail of Mount Machapuchre shiver. Crevice torn open by the insane barrel of the gun, a splash of blood gushed forth and spread like some violent energy in the victorious skies of my smoldering eyes. Lakshmi Lekali. Thank you very much. So I think I'll read. I'm just waiting for we have a launch of this magazine. We want to launch. We have a very distinguished Australian poet, Lavix, here, and we are waiting for Sachi to come, and then we can have a joint launch, followed by our distinguished poet Tulsi Divas's reading. I will read as one of the last poems. It's about editorial of this magazine I did, and this is about pandemic. And when the pandemic took place and everything was closed, and so this whole thing was very much this poem, which appeared also in the anthology that Sachi edited, published by Penguin. So this poem, I Hold My Breath, about pandemic. I hold my breath, stop my heart in a fraction of an astral pause, and bend to the ground to hear it coming from afar. Quarantined in the groggy chambers of my body for weeks and months, snuggled in the sunya of my sorrows and noxious prophecies of an impending doom, in the early hours of the dawn, hearing feverish tapping of grandma's twisted cane, hobbling down the hallway into the twilight that seems miles away, a mini earthquake spiraling upwards, wrecking her nerves, shuddering her fragile frame, and Grandpa rousing from an apocalyptic vision of some million cremations, a spiky bowl of phlegm rattling in his shriveled windpipe, an erratic rasping of watery lungs, drowning every minute in the far-off hospitals of the beloved cities of my travels. Bergamo, Milan, boroughs of New York City, parks of Bronx, streets of Corona, Elmhurst, and Jackson Heights. A fever racing along the river Seine, tossed over the patios of Cordoba, dragging a blood-drenched line of corpses up the slope of Andalusia's olive fields, and along the Thames, shores of Mumbai, rivers, beds of our Yamuna, desert cities of Jodhpur, Tank, Bhilwara, an angry anthem of seagulls and swallows trapped in the splintered siren of exhausted ambulances, scurrying over the wailing squares that ominous pigeons and bloodthirsty phantoms of the pandemic have repossessed. I hold my heart, put my long quivering ears to the ground to listen to the piercing bolero of joy in the sudden silence of Earth's astral moves as humanity goes hiding in the hellholes of Boccaccio's human comedy, shedding a sea of tears large enough for a million Buddhas to bathe in and rise remorseless. I hush myself up, learn to forget the count of corpses in the sudden blooming of rhododendrons, poinsettias, blue mimosas, and from my rooftop, spot a vision of snow ranges hidden for a decade beneath the dusty branches of malignant trees that I watered most of my early childhood. I hear it, a shrill whistle of a lammergeier, a bone breaker in the high peaks of the early spring, a festive trilling and squawking of invisible angels, a rhapsody of squint-eyed ravens, spiny babblers, white-crested laughing thrushes, warblers, and blood-beaked green parrots, along the shrill chorus of hyenas and jackals running home after a hiatus of a lifetime to bathe in the sparkling waters of glacier-fed rivers beyond barricades of the lockdown nations of the world. Thank you. So I think I will be giving a stage for Tulsi Divas because I think Sachi will take some time and we could do it in the end of the event. So Tulsi Divas.
Good afternoon to all poetry lovers present here. As Yusu have already said that we have come from Nepal to attend this literary festival. I am a poet, writer, and all at the same time folklorist of Nepal. Writing poems, being a poet, is my pleasure that almost I have covered more than 85 countries of the world. And I think the creative being a human being, the creativity or the creation created with the help of words, but words are just medium. How you feel, How do you really want to say and communicate? This is more important. Not following others. Try to make your own image of poet. That's the best way. Being in the area of creative writing, mainly poetry. That's what I feel. Long time back, we have started Creative Writers Society in Nepal. We also organize lot of international and national literary conference, mostly poetry, poets, invite poets, come, and then we exchange paper reading, going around. That's what we have been doing. I mean, poetry is not only taking me away from my country across the globe. The poet lovers or the creators, poets have come to Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, to be with us, reading poems and translating them into the respective different languages of the world. Anyway, I'm not going to say any more about poetry. I'll be reading a few poems of mine. It might be a bit difficult for you. Sometimes some of the images or what I have in my poems are not that simple, not that easy to go into the different layers of the meaning of the words that I have used in my poems. My poems are a bit difficult. People say that, but it's not that difficult for me. I can really explain. I can really tell something about, not only something about, all about my poems. The first poem I'm going to read is Rangeen Awazharuko Julus, procession of colored voices. I have to take blue voices jumping down the sky, float over the blue ocean. Float over the blue ocean, red voices emitted by martyrs' blood. Drying steadily, spill over rhododendron petals, rhododendron flowers, the Nepali national flower. Descending, yellow voices, descending from the evening horizons are nestling in the other layers of marigold. In the other layers of marigold, white voices melting out the barricade of clouds freeze over the solid high-rise bottom of the Himalayas. High-rise bottom of the Himalayas, green voices startled, escape from the evergreen dense forest, passing by the 7 mountain cliffs and bare hills, get uprooted with the tearless, get uprooted with the tearless banks, even from the agricultural land, migrating down in green fluidity, piling up green deposits to the bottom of the sea. To the bottom of the sea, black voices blemished by the mental pestilence, aridity of mind and full of conscience, are surging up in the flood, are surging up in the flood of untamable darkness. Untamable darkness. Aridity of mind and full of conscience are surging up in the flood of untamable darkness through the black tunnel. Through the black tunnel, the overflowing river of seething time. The overflow of the river of seething time. I, who came out in search of a voice, who came out in search of a voice, lost my own voice itself. Lost my own voice itself in the melee of voices. In the melee of voices, and returned home utterly voiceless, quiet, and lonely. Utterly voiceless, quiet, and lonely. After joining with respect this procession of colored voices, a color game of Holi played by time. A color game of Holi. Holi is the festival of colors. It's very popular throughout India and Nepal. After joining with respect the procession of colored voices, a color game of Holi played by time, is this silent homecoming of mine, my attainment of Buddhahood? Is this silent homecoming of mine, my attainment of the Buddhahood, or a preparation for another grand renunciation, or a preparation for another grand renunciation, like this colorless indecision I am voicing continuously, voiceless decision. Finish. And the other one is sun and cobweb. Sun and cobweb. Old sun, or splinter, bounds from the time's mountain. Bounds from the time's mountain, perhaps a black spider. Perhaps a black spider. Old sun, splinter, a splinter bounds from time's mountain, perhaps a black spider, now caught in the sky's branches, caught in the day's branches, needs consistently a wave, drawing lines of demarcation in the remaining time. In the remaining time, even in that little yellow sky, a falling splinter blown down by the winds to the crevices of the tree, growing within me. Growing within me. From the small woods of the weeks and months, from the small woods of weeks and months to the dense forests of centuries, tangled shafts of life, loose, undulating, some nestled in the smoky beams, and outside, straying around in thoughts, linger. Others stay huddled quietly in some corner where the leftover sky sunk into the mind's veins, into the mind veins. The old sun, a splinter bounds from the time's mountain. The old sun, a splinter bounds from the time's mountain, perhaps a black spider. Perhaps a black spider now hanging from the day's branches knits consistently a wave in the remaining time, drawing lines of demarcation. Drawing lines of demarcation even in the little yellow sky, a falling splinter blown down by the winds to the crevices of the tree growing within me. Done. Finished. This is a little bit longer. And now I'm going to tell you the story of a sick night. The story of a sick night. The refrigerator night is asleep as iron under the cover of rust. As iron under the cover of rust. The immanence of solid darkness is keeping a vigil all around. Sleep in vanish from my eyes. Sleep is banished from my eyes. Every moment with fractured spine is slipping away incessantly as a fried corn soybean would leak through the tattered folds of a sword. Through the tattered folds of a sword, still hot, damp fog, assailing eyelashes, perhaps the gourd life has to hang from the dismal branches of buckana trees. Some of the martyrs of Nepal were hanged on the buckana trees. This night is a cold rice. This night is a cold rice served by a hen obsessed by child mania. By a hen obsessed by child mania to sterility. This night is a heap of rice. This night is a heap of rice gone cold on a borla leaf. This borla leaf used by the villagers as their, to carry something they wanted to take away from or bring back to their home. A festering wound, itching to be scratched with the sterility. Going round on an axis, the Sargasso Sea, some water is sprinkled over the withering vegetables. Then the head is plagued under the shaping under the shaping strokes of the sun, under the shaping strokes of the sun, a row of mice, a tide of sea, a turban of plague, an infection of pestilence, infection of pestilence doing holy ablution in waters, contaminated by washing leprosy, contaminated by washing leprosy, growing is the dark of the 8th night of the waning moon towards its own altar of self-sacrifice, towards the Creator, towards the mourning, the death of a passion, vomiting blood all over the sky, vomiting blood all over the sky, a pile of dead bodies like a stalk of straw, cornered after the threshing ceremony of death. After the threshing ceremony of death, scattered are the corpses. Scattered are the corpses over gas wagon, gas chamber, threshing lawn, railway carriages. The condemned life has to crawl willy-nilly like larva in the dreadful night. Like larva in the dreadful night, I wonder, won't life freeze too? Clogged by ice and assailed by icy view? In this night, when time itself seems to be frozen, in this night, when the time itself seems to be frozen as a train upon its own gods, as a train upon its own gaze, the head goes dizzy as a lonely veil waked up into mind, opening out the vista of time, metamorphosis into layers of snow and a fun, a bleak rock-like one, performing a death ritual with seven head, getting capped by snow 1 foot, getting capped by snow 1 foot deep. Oh, waves after waves of sound are getting lost into the pool of great calm, into the great calm, into nothingness. Tender sounds are trying for a premature birth of hardened ice, scratching and tearing one's own flesh to reprimand one's own being with the captivated stones, acquiring a monkey's restlessness, sleeping perhaps is an exasperation. Sleeping perhaps is an exasperation under the quilt of ice. Sleeping perhaps is an earthquake under the quilt of ice. Earthquake and exasperation and earthquake, a little suicide in the mini sky of the garret. In the mini sky of the garret, an occasion when a black goat is lacerated at the altar of the blue goddess, massaging on its face the red soil as if soaked in blood and white earth, Dasai. This is one of the biggest festival we have among the Hindus in Nepal. And this is also known as Dasami. Dasai, an orgy of blood, our great festival. Dasai, an orgy of blood, our great festival. Dasai, a revelry in blood, our great occasion. Dasai, a ritual of resurrection, our great celebration. In the pool of blood, exasperation, and earth tremor, perhaps on the rim of the hollow of a dense banyan tree with enigmatic time's layer buried under it, throwing a focus of its demonic eyes like a guard trooper's searchlight, keeping guard around a blackout concentration camp. As the crane, pecking at its victim trouts, as a sly sadhu cat catching the devotee rat, isn't the vulture waiting to hope over the bird's fearless younglings? Won't the rats allay the cat? Ever again put on a sadhu's modus vivendi? A sadhu's modus vivendi? Won't the trout allay the crane? Wear a meditative appearance? Won't the birds allay the vulture? Reign as their protector? Perhaps Vishnu Sarma. Vishnu Sarma is the name of writer of Panchatantra, very famous Sanskrit book. Perhaps Vishnu Sarma have to tell the stories like this again and again. The story of cats and rats, the story of cranes and trouts, the story of vulture and birds. Such is perhaps the Panchatantra, a collection of fables. A collection of fables, such is perhaps the history of man and man himself. A history of man and man himself. The man is, in my hair is crucified. This is that. So little a bit compact one. Now, I'll go to a bit smaller poems, easier poems, so that it's not cloudy outside, but the title of the small my poems that I'm going to read is Cloudy Day. When the weather is overcast, even the day catches cold. When the weather is overcast, even the day catches cold. And the day, resting his heavy head, laden with a mass of iron, in the restless mind of uneasy hollow wood, shrouds himself with a dirty quilt, right from top to toe, and retires quietly somewhere to some freezing basement of my heart. The freezing basement of my heart, or to the darkened garret of my head, just to lie low all by himself. When the weather is overcast, even the day catches cold. Done. लेखिनुहोस् न अब यो म सकिहाल्थ्यो किन फेरि बिचमा गर्नु न म अब 2-3 वटा पढिदिन्छु I won't read much. I'll be reciting another one, that is, the title is Cloth and Life. Cloth and Life. If life were an apparel, it would be shaped and hung on the peg in the room. Perhaps take a look at it a while, where oneself is crucified on the cloth peg of one's room. If life were an apparel, it would be set and hung on the peg in the room, perhaps like a look at it a while, where oneself is crucified on the cloth peg of one's room. If life were a bolt of cloth, it would have been possible to sew and have it sewn according to one's requirements. If life were even an ill-fitting apparel, it would be possible to be recut and refit to one's measurement. To one's measurements, one could visit the tailor and lay one's life for a sleep on the bolts of cloths. If life were an apparel, one could set and hang it. If life were a fragment of cloth, one could embroider and pattern it. One could mend oneself the holes, if any, or the mending could be ordered to be done. Life could be patched up. Then one could easily wear a brand new apparel of life. Or one could go to a mender of life apparel to be mended out of its own redundant threads. If life were a garment, one could set and suspend it. If life were a garment, it could be washed and rinsed. When dirty and soiled, if one were free, one could soap it. One could soap it and wash it in a water basin and then turn it stone dry, or give it to a washerman to clean life at the stone font. And away from the cold stone, let it sunbath itself dry on the green meadow. If life got shrunk or ruffled, one could moisten it for ironing. If life became extreme, better take a week-long leave. Better take a week-long leave to visit the laundry. If life were a piece of cloth, it could be sewed and hung on a cloth peg. If life were an apparel, it could be said for a look at oneself and exhibit it from some distance. Or life could jump into a well to have a deep look at itself, or slashing the fogs of dreams, life would be able to open the curtain to the sky of reality. The curtain of sky of reality, or like a stump of a beheaded dream, the head could be rested in its own hat for a while. if not enough, one's hands, legs, trousers, sword, and be absolutely free from oneself. And be absolutely free from oneself, then dream in the day and show the dreams to others too. If life were a clock, it could be barred and suspended. If life were a garment, one could sit and hang it on the cloth peg of one's room and ogle at it for a while. When one is crucified on the same hook by striking a nail on the nail of one's one very room. I think as he is, I think finished. अब जाऊ अब मलाई छ पढ्दिन म त Thank you so much for your patience to hear me reciting my poem.
We are towards the end of the event, so we have Lavix and Kesha Chandan to launch the Australian issue of the Pratik magazine that we have just brought out. So I will ask both of them to please come and do the honors, and Lavix will speak a little bit about the magazine, and Sachi will say a few words.
Dear friends, I have been a friend of Pratik for quite long. I think almost since its beginning, I have been in some sense directly or indirectly associated with this journal. And I'm also indebted in a personal way to Mr. Yuyulsu Sharma because he was the one who brought out my first collection of poetry in English translation. That was 32 years back. Of course, I had published quite a few Malayalam collections by that time, and I was keeping translating my poems into English. I was looking for a publisher, and it is hard always to come across a publisher to publish poetry. And he came forward with alacrity and said, yes, we will do it. I was in Kerala at that time, I remember, and then by the time it was published, I had moved to Delhi as the editor of the journal Indian Literature. And that was how I got to know Yuyulsu and Nirala Publications and also the journal Pratik, which often brings out special issues on literatures of various countries and continents. So I am extremely happy that this time Pratik is focused on Australian writing. It has a series of fine poets writing in Australia. We have some examples of fiction, creative non-fiction. There's a long interview, a conversation with Felicity Walk, and art by some of the finest artists of Australia. And I'm sure this will give an insight into contemporary Australian writing to all those who are not very familiar with the writing in Australia. I have not gone through the contents because, as you know, I have been running about from morning to evening. So what I will do is, I know you are already oversaturated with poetry, but so you can perhaps suffer one more. This is the poem with which Pratik begins by Alison J. Barton, How to Grieve in the Open Air. The first, it's a kind of sequence. The first one is called A Wild Flower. Flora is lost to the cold alone. Stems whipping at the ground, fish swim in tiny crescents, preserve the balance of water. Rows of trees distend, staggering shadows with sunlight like laws. Stories have already told me bound to mountains, unable to command the seasons. It is winter because the dusk is charcoal. I approach the smell of your fire. We break in a whisper. The second one, bows. When I reach for you, my arm moves between segments of ivory light. Dust floats the ground in sheets. A wind softer than an old song rustles as a breath askew. Shallow trees lengthways at the surface discard bark shrouds. And three, into the valley. Plants don't grow by the smell of water. Honeysuckle spices in the hills recess cascades to the river edge. Gloaming birds blur to still on plate glass ripples. Tepid clouds upside down. I squint to the peak. This, I think, is a good example. Les will tell me of Australian poetry being written today. So this, I'm sure this will be a kind of introduction to quite a few of you to contemporary Australian writing with which we are not sufficiently familiar. Even though we know some of the finest poets, we had Les Murray, we have Les Biggs, we know quite a few. But then we have quite a lot of other writers with whom we are not familiar. And I'm sure this issue will be a kind of introduction to many of these unknown or less known writers of Australia. Thank you, Yuil Su, for having brought out this wonderful issue of Pratik. And Les and me together happily release this issue. Thank you.
I'll be brief. We've all had a very long day with poetry and are enriched by it. Global curiosity. The process by which all of the voices from around the globe interact. At the last festival I was at, there was a very intense dialogue going on between three of us. It lasted about an hour and a half. And it was towards the end, we suddenly realised that the dialogue was conducted in English, Spanish and French, but somehow it seemed seamless. This global curiosity is reflected in this issue. Just as we are enriched here with this festival, this extraordinary festival which brings so many voices together, this is a very interesting introduction to Australian poetry. It's not I wouldn't say it's a collection of the best or the most famous Australian poets. More, it's a reflection of the entire spectrum. We have new voices, we have very established voices like Jill Jones and Peter Boyle. We have Indigenous voices, which my country has seen slowly emerge to prominence in the last 10, 15 years, like Beeb Backhouse, Sam Wagon-Watson, and Allison, whose poem we heard earlier. We're seeing voices from the array of countries where people have come to Australia to form a life. And they include voices from like Elif Cezanne and Christopher Raja. It's fairly heavily themed on ecology, the ecological challenges, and the personal and cultural challenges the country faces. Again, I'm going to be brief, so read this, enjoy this, and we'll meet again. Thanks.
I express my sincere gratitude to Tulasi Divasa and Yuyutsu Sharma for your inspiring words. I also thank our Honorable President K. Sachidanandan Sir for conducting the book launch of the book Pratik written by Yuyutsu Sharma. I also thank the audience for your presence and encouraging participation. Thank you all.